Hello everybody, John here, and welcome to this episode of John's Models. In this episode, I'm going to install something that you may have heard of before. It's called a LocoFi module. And so what's LocoFi, you ask? It's a little module like a DCC decoder that uses Wi-Fi instead of DCC commands through the track. So you put it into a locomotive just like you would a DCC decoder, and it creates a little Wi-Fi network that you can then control the train using an app on a phone. So I'm going to guide you through the process of how to install the module into an HO scale model. So let's go over to the workbench. Okay, so I'm over at the workbench now, and these are the tools I'm going to use here. Tools and supplies, I suppose. I have my soldering iron, some screwdrivers. The LocoFi module comes with a speaker with an enclosure, and then of course I have my wire strippers and a cradle so that I can work on the locomotive upside down without damaging anything. So let's get started. So this locomotive is a Kato C44-9W, and it's very easy to take apart. All you really have to do is take the couplers off. So there's one screw on this side, and there's another screw here that holds the coupler in. And once I have these out, the shell lifts right off. Okay, so as you can see, it has a factory light board. This is held in by a Phillips head screw here and one here. Your LEDs come off of the board, so I'm going to have to find a way to mount LEDs in about the same place because the model uses these light pipes to conduct the light to the proper place on the shell, and I don't want to have to redo the lights. So I'm going to devise a way to mount LEDs, either these LEDs or the ones that come with the module here and here. And then I'm going to arrange the module basically on top of where this was. Still deciding exactly how I'm going to do it. I may even just leave this light board here, just disconnect it and use it as a flat surface to mount this on. Haven't decided yet. But one of the caveats here is because the light pipes are inside the shell, there's not really any room for the speaker. So if I wanted to put the speaker back here someplace, it will interfere with the light pipes. So most likely, I need to look at this a little bit more and maybe do some measuring and planning and figure this out. There's actually a provision underneath in here. There's a circular speaker enclosure included. So I might just use that. Unless if there's a way for me to situate this rectangular speaker back here someplace, maybe up in the shell somehow. But I'll figure that out and make that decision as we go. So for now though, I want to talk about the factory light board. If you've ever done a hardwire on a locomotive like this, you'll know that it's not that hard. Basically, all you need to do is ensure first that the motor's isolated, and this is a DCC ready model, so the motor comes isolated out of the box. And that just means that there's no part of the motor contacting the frame. So basically, all you need to do is take the track power from the right side, which comes up from here, from the truck. Normally this would be a red wire if this were NMRA color coded, and then this also would be a red wire because the track power on the right side or the engineer side always is red. So these two wires will end up being connected to the red wire on the module. And I may refer to the module as a decoder. It's not really a decoder, but it's like a decoder, and that's kind of what I'm used to. So I may use those terms interchangeably here. So anyway, the red wire will connect to these two to get the track power, and then the black wire on the module, that's this one, will connect to the fireman side track power. So these will be disconnected from this light board. Then there's one difference with the LocoFi board that's not exactly the same as a regular DCC decoder, and that has to do with the common wire and the function leads for the lights. So on LocoFi, and it says this in the directions, so you have to really pay attention to your directions when you're hooking everything up here. It's the opposite of what you would expect. So the common normally is positive. That would be the blue wire. And then your function wires, which would be the yellow and white in this case, are normally negative. And it matters because LEDs are polarity sensitive. And if you hook them up backwards, they won't turn on. So you just have to make sure that when you're hooking up your LEDs, you put your blue to the negative side and your white and your yellows, respectively, to the positive sides with LocoFi. So that's one caveat that's very important to know. Then, of course, we have your motor leads. And it's been my experience that usually the gray motor lead comes down on the engineer side and the orange motor lead comes down on the other side. Now, if you get those backwards, it'll still run. It'll just run in the opposite direction of what you expect. So that's it, though. I mean, it's not that complicated. You just have to make the correct connections with the correct wires. The hardest part about this install is going to be situating the LEDs properly and running the wires down to the speaker into that speaker enclosure, or finding a place for this one. So here we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go one connection at a time. That way I don't accidentally mess up and connect something in the wrong way or the wrong wire somewhere. Always, if you go one at a time, it's a lot easier to not mess up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the front truck wire and gang it with the red from the module, and then I'm going to take the rear truck wire and connect it to those two, and then I'm going to put this heat shrink tubing over that joint, solder joint, so that it won't have any possibility for shorting out. It's one of the cool things, they included this with the module. And heat shrink tubing, in case you're not familiar with that, is something that when you heat it up with your soldering iron or heat gun, whatever, I use a soldering iron because I have it handy when I'm doing this, it'll shrink down around that solder joint so there's no possibility for shorting. It's very cool. Okay, now that I got that done, I'm going to go ahead and connect the other side, just the track power from the rear truck, like so. Pull on it a little, make sure it's a good connection, right? And slide the heat shrink tubing over the whole bit there, like so. And once your heat shrink tubing is in place, you can just heat it with the end of your soldering iron like this. And now that joint's protected. So I'm going to do the same thing with the black wire on the other side, connecting it to the black wire of the module. It's the exact same process. You put two of the wires together first. I like to twist them so that when you solder them again later to the other one, that they don't come apart then, and then cover it up with your heat shrink tubing. Okay, so the track power is now hooked up. Let's move on to the motor leads. Okay, so I've decided that the easiest way to do the power to the motor is to use this copper strip that it comes with. There's one on each side. One attaches to the top of the motor and one attaches to the bottom. But what I'm going to do then is put some solder. I'm going to cut it back just a little bit. And I'm going to put some solder on it and then attach the wire to the copper strip. That way I don't have to take the motor out of the frame here and do regular solder points on the bottom and the top. I'm not going to cut too much off because I want to make sure I have enough. I can always cut more if I need to, right? So I'll just cut that there. And I'm going to use probably some Kapton tape to tape it down here, just so that it doesn't flop out and contact something or try to contact something outside the frame, because this was held in place, remember, by the light board. It actually, I think it helped hold the light board in place, to be honest. So there's that, and then I need to put a little bit of solder on this other side here. Okay, and I've just kind of flattened out the other side and put a little solder on that one. And the idea here, of course, is that this solder is going to be what the leads from the module will connect to. It's been my experience that orange usually goes to the fireman side, and gray usually seems to go to the engineer side. So I'll get these set up here. Quick note here, don't know if you noticed this, but as I'm making these connections, I'm also taping down wires to keep everything neat. And this is a good time to put this on a track. I'm going to make sure that nothing can contact anything else. So these bare wires here will be bent away from each other and such. And what I'm looking to do here before I go any further is to make sure that I got the motor leads right. I don't want to have to take it all apart and untape everything that I'm going to neaten up here later because I didn't test it ahead of time. So I'm going to get a track with uniform power, which is what this needs, and do a quick little test and make sure it's going in the right direction. Okay, so I ran my test and it worked okay in terms of it actually ran, but I did have to reverse the wires on the motor. So in this case, the orange came down on the engineer side and the gray came down on the fireman side. So I'm going to turn my attention to the lights next, and I've talked about it before and I'll talk about it again. In the instructions, this tells us that the white and yellow are actually positive instead of negative. Normally those are negative in standard NMRA color, and then the common is actually the negative in this case. So it's just a caveat that's unique to LocoFi, and I'm guessing that they will probably change that, to be compliant with NMRA standards at some point, but this is how it is now. So I'm going to have to create a wire that runs off of the blue common, and it will go to the front and to the back, and then I will connect that to the negative on the LED, right? Because, like I said, in this case, the blue is negative. If you connect it using the NMRA standard, the LEDs won't work because the LEDs are polarity sensitive. So this will go to negatives, and then the white will be routed to the front using a little extension on this, obviously, to go to the front headlight, and then the yellow will be routed to the back headlight, which is going to be right in this area anyway, to make the rear headlight work. So first things first, I'll make the common connection. Okay, I got the blue wire connected, and it runs a length up to the front as well as an open piece here to connect to the rear headlight. And I put the frame in the picture so that I can kind of guesstimate where the light pipes are. And I measured this earlier when I was taking the model apart and determined that if I can mount an LED right about here where this ridge is in the frame, and then just in front of the module right here, that'll give me about the same spacing that the original light board had. And that should put the LEDs in the right place for the light pipes to pick up the light and route it to the correct places in the frame, basically in the headlight castings and in the ditch lights. So my next step is to create a couple of mounts using some styrene, which I'll show you in just a second here, but then also to wire the headlights. So that's what we're doing next. All right, so here's the challenge. If you look at the model, you can see that there's a wire for track power here and one on the other side as well. And originally I just wanted to make sort of a, a styrene mount for the LEDs, but the wires obstruct that flat plane there where it would go. So instead, I made my styrene and I filed out little notches that will accommodate or make space for those track power wires. So when it's installed, it'll look like this. And what I'm going to do is just use some CA glue to affix this to this little corner in the frame here. And of course, I'll cut the leads shorter on the LED there. And that's where it will mount. And this puts the LEDs pretty much where they were with the factory light board. So this should work okay using the factory light pipes in the frame to conduct the light to the headlights and the ditch lights in the front and just the headlight in the back. If you look, you can see I already have one set up in the front here. It's just glued in, like I said. So I'm going to solder the wires to the LEDs in the correct orientation, and then I'll put it back on the track and test everything before I start the final reassembly here. And let me show you a little trick with LEDs. Since I'm going to cut my LEDs leads off, and I don't want to have to try to keep track of which side's positive and which side's negative, this comes in handy, knowing what I'm about to tell you. If you look on this example here, the post on the right side comes up, and inside that little glass bubble, there's a whole bunch of silver stuff. It's real thick. And then on the other side, there's just a little sliver of it, like a little triangle. Well, this also tells you which side is positive and which side is negative. The one with all the bunch of stuff is negative, and the one with just a little tiny bit is positive. Now, if you want, you can also look at the LED when you first pull it out of the package, and one of the leads is longer than the other. That also can tell you which is positive and which is negative. But if you remember this trick, you don't have to worry about that. And sometimes maybe you're looking for an LED because you ran out of new ones and you have stuff in your junk box that's already cut short. This will allow you to tell which one is positive and which one's negative. So once again, the one with all the thick bunch of stuff on the right is negative. The one with the little sliver on the left is positive. Time to put the colored positive on the positive lead. And this is the rear, so this is the correct one, just FYI. Then of course I got my heat shrink tubing, which I think I'm going to wait to really shrink the tubing until I'm 100% positive everything's hooked up right, just like I said. And of course I'll neaten up the wires. All right, so I just need to put my little lengths of heat shrink tubing on the respective pieces here now. And we're almost in business to give this thing another little test run on the track. But this time I'll show you because you'll actually be able to see something. That is, you'll be able to see the lights. I can shrink these because I'm not going to need to mess with these connections at all. And I also have plenty of space in case I needed to cut them off for some reason and start over with these. Okay, so here we are. I've put the locomotive on a powered track and I'm going to start it up. Okay, so that's good. That works. Here's the rear headlight. Oh, what do you know? And the front headlight? Oh, goody. that really makes me happy. That means that everything's working the way it's supposed to. And then it moves. These things have a lot of momentum built into them. But let's just make sure everything's working. There it is. Okay. That means yeah, everything's working. That means I can do the final part, which is figuring out where I'm going to put the speaker and how, and then just reassembling it. So something kind of funny happened here. I went to start figuring out what I was going to do with the speaker, and I noticed that the light pipe in here goes back further than I originally thought. So I had to relocate the back bracket light mount that I made. It was up here, and I relocated it back here, so it should work fine now. And I had purchased a round speaker. As I mentioned earlier in this video, this model has a provision for a speaker in the fuel tank. It's a 28 millimeter speaker, and I have one, but when I started doing this project, I really just wanted to use what it comes with, you know, aside from little stuff like this styrene, because everybody has styrene, right? And this comes with a really good speaker, so I want to try to use it. And I think what I'm going to do is I don't like this because the light pipe is there, but I'm pretty sure that if I put the speaker here with some foam tape, it will stay in place, and it has its own enclosure. So, and it looks like the wires are just long enough that I can get away with that. I have the soldering iron heating up right now, and I'm going to heat shrink the leads from the LEDs and get this all taped down. I'm going to leave this exposed though, because this is an SD card, a micro SD card, and it has the sounds for the decoder in it. And one of the cool things about this setup here is that if you know how to make your own sounds, you can take this micro SD card out and customize your sounds that way. So I want to leave that exposed so that if I need to get to it, you know, I don't have to remove a bunch of tape or anything like that. So I'm going to neaten up the wires, get this all taped up and make it smaller basically so that I can get the speaker taped inside the shell, and we'll give this thing a real test. Okay, I think I'm done with this install part. I got the speaker mounted, just like I said, inside the shell there. Now I have to try to put the shell back on, and I'm really hoping that everything will fit. I measured pretty carefully, so it should be okay. So that's it. It's a pretty straightforward installation. kind of like hardwiring a DCC decoder. All you have to really worry about is making sure that the wires are in the right place and that the solder joints are legitimate. So I think that this is an interesting product, and being able to control the trains without having to take the commands through the tracks opens up a whole different possibility for dead rail. If you want to power your trains with batteries and you can take the commands over the air, I think that would eliminate the need for cleaning track, which I think is a pretty cool idea. I know most of the people I talk to with layouts, especially big layouts, hate cleaning the track. It's like their least favorite thing about model railroading. So I want to thank Piyush of LocoFi for offering me the chance to show this to the people on this channel. I think it's something interesting and different and something new that we haven't really seen much of until now. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what develops in the next year, or over the course of the next year. 2019 is right around the corner, and see, what kind of improvements are made to the board, what kind of improvements are made to the app that controls the train. It's really cool, and I think there's a lot of potential here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Anyway, I'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.